This is the first session towards Cyber for Digital Inclusion, and the session name is Digital Identity for All, Global Best Practices. We have 4 panelists here. First, I will call Mr. Sewak Sharma, Chairman TRAI, on the stage. Thank you, sir. Next in line, sir, Mr. Ajay Bhushan Pandey, he is CEO, UIDAI. Pandey sir will steer this session and moderate also. Next panelist is Mr. Lalitesh, Katragadda, founder, National Information Platform for Next Billion. And the 4th panelist, Mr. Michael Walma, Cyber Foreign Policy Coordinator, Canadian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Welcome you all, sir. I will hand over the mic now to our CEO, UIDAI, Ajay Bhushan Pandey, sir, to steer the session now onwards. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, friends. In fact, after coming here just now, I got the message that I have to not only speak, but also I have to moderate, right? So let me extend a very, very warm welcome to all of you, and also to the panelists. The theme for this today's session is the digital identity for all, global best practices. Right? So in fact, I would like to invite Mr. Sewak Sharma, who is currently chairman of Telecome Regulatory Authority of India. He was the person who was involved in this Aadhaar project right from the day one, and he was involved in the very, very initial stages, and then he stabilized the project. And in fact, I had an opportunity to work with him during those days. So I would like to request him to share some of his experiences, and also what are the lessons learned, and then the best practices. Over to Mr. Sharma.
Can I go there? Good morning, friends. Thank you very much, Dr. Pandey, for inviting me. It is really a pleasure and privilege to be here with you today. And what I'll do is I'll just contextualize the overall situation rather than going into the implementation details. And that basically, hopefully, will sort of other, Dr. Pandey, for example, is now heavily into applications based on Aadhaar, and he will certainly like to share as to what his thoughts are. So let me begin with the beginning itself, which is basically why was this project started, the Aadhaar Unique ID project in India. Now, our country was grappling with the issue of ensuring uniqueness for people, identities, because there were cases of large amount of leakages in various programs of the government where one person ended up creating multiple ghost identities and duplicate identities. So therefore, there were 2 contexts. One is that to provide unique identity for everybody in the country. That was the first purpose and context of Unique ID project. The second one was that because, first of all, those who had the identities had managed to get multiple identities, and those who did not have any identity, they were excluded from the benefit delivery programs. So the second objective was to provide IDs to those who do not have one, so that they are able to access formal systems of the governance and government. Because as you know, the first question any formal system will ask you, who are you? And you say, I am R.S. Sharma, prove that you are R.S. Sharma. So essentially this proving of identity is this second part. So basically one, to include everybody, and second, to ensure uniqueness. These are the two objectives. And then when we started the project, there were certain, constraints within which, or parameters within which we had to work. So one was, when we looked at the global landscape, we found that, for example, UK's ID project, the cost of one identity was £135. That was the cost. This is estimates by London School of Economics, and of course, other estimates vary, but the minimum of them is £135. So we are 1 billion, more than 1 billion indeed, in fact 1.3 billion now. So 1 billion multiplied by £135 is basically 135 billion pounds, which is about $150 billion. So how, can the country afford to have such kind of, sort of numbers? So we said one is cost. How do we create a frugal identity? How do we minimize the cost? So that was the first overarching goal, so to say. Uniqueness, of course, was the most overarching goal, because in fact the name of the authority which was created was Unique Identification Authority of India, and I am still wondering whether the uniqueness is an adjective to the authority or to the identity. So that was so much of emphasis on uniqueness. Another was time. How do we conclude? Time and speed, in fact. So if you start doing it and if you do 1 million in a year, then it will never complete, because we are growing at the rate of 1.3 billion multiplied by 2.5% of that, which is, you can compute the numbers. So that being the case, we need to have a speed. The other thing was scalability. How do you really, scale up? Which is, suppose you employ a technology. The technologies do not scale gracefully when the numbers are increasing. They are not always linear in terms of numbers. So scalability was another overarching goal. Inclusion, the basic fundamentals on which the whole program was started was to include everybody, to give ID to those who did not have. So therefore, inclusion was another very, very important overarching goal. The next was, how do you develop an identity system which works for all kinds of applications? So essentially, the idea was to develop it as a platform. So we can't develop it as an application. So we said, let's develop it as a platform. So that was another very, very important goal. And of course, how do you future-proof the technologies? Because technologies are changing so fast that, today I employ some technology, tomorrow it becomes obsolete. So future-proofing of technology was another very, very important overarching goal. So broadly speaking, we had the goal of cost, speed, scalability, platform nature, future-proofing of technology, inclusion, uniqueness. These were some of the broad overarching goals of this project. So once, you had that context of uniqueness and inclusion, and then you started, inclusion means universal coverage, and then you had those goals. So essentially, having fixed those overarching goals and constraints, whatever you call them, then we had to see how do you design the project so that the design is consistent with the overarching goals. You design something which contradicts with your goals, then it's not really, and even you have number of design principles and they are all contradictory and they are not consistent set of those principles, then, it will not work out. So therefore, we had to design it in a manner, and believe me, we spent 15 months. The first Aadhaar was issued on 29th of September 2010. The authority and, we joined, Mr. Nilekani joined on 24th of July. I joined as the CEO on 31st of July 2009. So we took 15 months to really produce the first UID letter. which means it is really, we took a lot of time in designing. So the first part we designed, and we said, it is a number, not a card. People said, what are you doing? I said, we are not, and there were huge fashion of smart cards, and people thought smart cards are the smart things. And we said, no, we will just give a number to an individual, it will not be a card. Because card itself costs about 100 rupees. And if 100 rupees again multiplied by 1.3 billion, it becomes 1300 billion rupees, which is hugely costly. And we thought, and we said that in a digital online world, we don't need tokens, we don't need smart cards. Smart cards are merely tokens, offline tokens, we don't need them. So therefore, it was designed as an online tokenless identity. This actually ensured that we just do not spend any money on these smart cards. Smart cards also have their, life cycle costs, so we don't want them. So that was the first design principle. We will give just a number, not a card. Then the second issue was, after all, what is the purpose of this identity? The purpose of this identity is to give benefits to people, to include them in the benefit delivery programs, and to ensure cleaning up of the databases. So if that is the case, why don't you sort of include all these benefits part, whether the guy is a BPL person or whether he is, eligible for this subsidy, that subsidy, etc., etc. We said no. This is a platform, and the benefits on that will be an application. So therefore, we designed this is only an identity infrastructure, which means it will prove X is X, nothing. It will just say this person is this person who he claims to be. What he deserves is not really the purpose and the objective and the function of the Unique ID Authority of India. So we said this is the world's first digital identity which is actually without eligibility. If you look at it, think of it, what is a passport? A passport is a certificate that you are a citizen of a country. What's a driving license? A driving license is essentially a certificate which entitles you to drive. Now, that obviously who is capable of driving, that identity is underlying concept in that driving license. Similarly, in election ID card, anything, you talk of anything, they are all eligibility documents. So we said we will create a document which is bereft of all eligibilities. It is just an identity document. This will keep us, limited in our scope and function. We will not have this problem of function creep, which many programs tend to have. So therefore, this was an identity without eligibility. So much so that we said, let nationality also be kept out of it. So we said, we are not going to verify who is Indian national or not. And of course, for that purpose, this project came in for a huge criticism. Talking of criticism, I must say that there is no project in this country which has, taken so much of criticism from all sides. There were huge, I can enumerate as to which are the kind of criticism, but that's not the purpose here. So essentially, it is so much so that this is just a proof that you are residing in the country. You are a resident of India, not really a citizen of India. So even diplomats who are here for 6 months or more, they are also eligible for Aadhaar. So it is actually identity without eligibility. The next issue was, and the privacy debate which is happening now, believe me, we were conscious of that debate 8 years back. And we said, let us have privacy by design included in this project. Let us not, we'll follow certain principles of privacy by design. So what are the principles of privacy by design? One is minimal information. You collect the information which is required for the purpose for which you are collecting the information. So we collected only 4 attributes of a person: his name, his or her name, gender, date of birth, that is age, and communication address. That's all. UID Authority of India has no information. Of course, biometrics had to be collected because that's the basis on which you can establish uniqueness. That is the technology part of it. So essentially, this was, we did it, that privacy by design was incorporated. Minimal information. The purpose for which this information was collected, that is purpose limitation. That was another part of it. So essentially, we created a system which actually had privacy by design. Another attribute is random numbers. So looking at a car, if you see a car, you see JH something for Jharkhand, HY or H Haryana and Delhi. You don't, we said no. Let this, people said that, why don't you give the numbers which indicates, the first 2 digits indicate the state, the 3rd digit indicates the gender, 4th digit the age, etc. And there are ID systems in the world which have date of birth as a part of these numbers. We said, no, we will have random numbers. So actually we created a random number and it's a 12-digit random number, 12 digits is a check digit. These 11 digits, you can accommodate 100 billion numbers, 10 to the power 11. And we said, we are just 1.2 billion, so the density on that number space, because it's all random and randomly distributed, it's just 1.2%. So you can't even guess that this number, this may not be a Aadhaar number, valid Aadhaar number itself. So therefore, random number, and many other principles I can speak on and on about how we constructed privacy by design in Aadhaar. Then of course, the other issues were, how do we execute? So the execution choices also was very important in order to fulfill the overarching goals which I enumerated to you. So one is, we created a central software because we can't allow people to collect information whichever way they want. So it requires to be in a standard centralized way. So while we created a central enrollment software, we actually enrollment ecosystem was multi-registrar model, multiple registrars, and it was a completely decentralized model. What also was done is that incentive alignment. So every person in the value chain, whether it's that he's an enrollment agent or enrollment agency or a registrar, everybody was interested in doing things faster because their payment was linked to the successful generation of Aadhaar. So the more data you provide for more Aadhaar generations you get. This is the first time in the government where it's an outcome-based payment system. It's not as if I have done so much of work, therefore you pay me. No. Whatever outcome you have created, we will pay you according to that. So that's another part. Then of course, the trained operators, data should be specified. And the most important part, data-driven decision making. We did not take decisions on the basis of some anecdotes that this doesn't work, that doesn't work. It was data. So we actually, in the Aadhaar enrollment system, there are 108 metadata points which we collected. When every enrollment is being done, we know exactly when was that done, how much time the operator took, on which screen he put the backspace, on which screen he typed wrongly, etc., etc. So believe me, the entire data of the enrollment part is with the UIDAI, which actually monitored, which effectively allowed us to monitor, things. So, and of course, we took special efforts at inclusion. So we created special outreach programs for those who are disadvantaged. For example, orphan boys and girls in the orphanage. For example, the people with leprosy, people who were living, all kinds of inclusion efforts were done so as to make this program more inclusive. There are other choices which we took, execution choices, again consistent with the overall design goals and the design principles. And of course, why Aadhaar becomes so important? There are 2 value propositions only. One is uniqueness. Now this uniqueness property is extremely important. It actually enables cleaning up of the entire databases. So it will clean up Benami transactions, for example. Now we are talking of Benami transactions cleaning up. It will clean up the entire beneficiary databases from ghosts and duplicates. So cleaning is the one of the properties of uniqueness. The other we introduced, and nobody understood at that time, was authentication. You can authenticate so that you are able to prove who you are online in a digital transaction. And that actually becomes very, very important. And because of these two properties, we built an entire ecosystem. What Sharad will call India stack. So we created electronic KYC. We created e-sign, which is online digital signature on demand. We created digital locker. So we have a huge attendance system is one of the applications, and you can see, who is there's a digital attendance marking system. So there are a lot of applications we created. I feel that we just scratched the surface. It has already ended up saving multiple times the whole thing. The whole total investment on Aadhaar thus far is just $1.5 billion. And we have, even on a single program, we are saving billions and billions of dollars. So actually, it is just happened, it's just beginning to happen, and maybe Ajay will elaborate on that. TRAI, my own organization, we introduced eKYC for mobile connections. And of course, now we are digitizing the entire mobile database by this verification process, which will save huge amount of money for the operators. The time to just onboard a person has reduced to a couple of minutes from many hours and no paper. It's a paperless onboarding system. It is promoting digital financial inclusion, Janadan, Aadhaar, mobile, this Jam Trinity. So there are a whole lot of application systems, and I'll not really take your time describing those. I think there are more qualified people to do that. So thank you very much. Just wanted to share with you as to what have been the overarching goals, the design principles, the execution principles, and of course, the application ecosystem built on top of Aadhaar. Thank you very much.
No, sir. In fact, perfectly all right, sir. Thank you, Mr. Sharma, for giving sharing his experience of how he started this project, Aadhaar, and what were our goals, what were our objectives, and what were our principles, and how we went about doing it. Now, we have in the panelist Mr. Michael Walma. He's a Cyber Foreign Policy Coordinator, Canadian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I will request him to share his view on digital identity for all. What are the global best practices? Mr. Walma.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you to everyone for being here this morning. I'd like to thank the government of India for hosting this conference, for the wonderful hospitality that they've offered to all of us. It's been a great time here in Delhi, and I appreciate the efforts that have been put forward. I'd like to thank the moderator and my co-panelists, and I'd like to thank all of you for being here this morning. Allow me to start by saying that, unlike my fellow panelists, I am not an expert in this field. I am responsible in my department for the coordination of our international cyber foreign policy. But it's clear, and anyone would recognize, that even as a non-expert, the importance of the issues of the digital identity. We've heard from our panelists today, we heard from the Honorable Prime Minister yesterday about the important development goals that are advanced by the development of digital identities. So I think it does not take an expert, frankly, to recognize the importance of this issue. Certainly, this has been recognized universally, worldwide. We have, for example, in the Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted, one of the goals specifically, Sustainable Development Goal 16.9, is related to the question of identities. It says that by 2030, the world should provide legal identities for all, including birth registration. Now, it's important to note that that goal does not speak of a digital identity, but rather a legal identity. But it is also noted that the adoption of digital identities would allow a cost-effective and leapfrogging effect in order to be able to attain that sustainable development goal. And I would say that this is not just a standalone goal. The World Bank analysis of the Sustainable Development Goals has indicated that this goal of the adoption of a legal identity for all is linked to at least 10 other sustainable development goals. For example, goal 1.3, social protection, including for the most vulnerable. 1.5, assistance in dealing with shocks and disasters. 1.4, access to the poor, to economic resources, including property and finance. Goals 5A and B, the empowerment of women. 3.2, the ending preventable deaths of newborns. Improving energy efficiencies and eliminating harmful subsidies. Reducing remittance costs. Reducing corruption and fighting crime and terrorism. All of these sustainable development goals are linked to the issue of having a legal identity. So I think it's clear, even to someone new to the issue as I am, how important this issue is. It's also recognized that, as we heard in the case of Aadhaar, that paper-based forms of identity are very difficult, particularly for extending to poor or isolated communities, including the cost. And therefore, there are potential enormous gains that can be made by adopting digital-based identities and mobile platforms for their execution. For example, again, pointing to World Bank studies on the matter, the World Bank estimates that governments worldwide could save $50 billion annually simply from the efficiencies of adopting digital IDs. But the World Bank and others have also noted, as my esteemed colleague before, that in order to harness these advantages, it's necessary to have in place robust legal and technical frameworks for the protection of data and privacy. It's clear that governments must instill a climate of trust in the use of such systems if they are to be successful. I would say, for example, that one study suggested that as much as $480 billion of the potential value of the digital ID would be lost to the European Union if the system developed in the European Union were not trusted by the population. So it's clear that missteps in addressing trust or in the implementation can defeat the economic benefits of such a system and in fact lead to negative economic outcomes. So we see, of course, that this is a critical issue, an important issue for development and for inclusion. If I may, I'll turn now to the example of Canada and what we are trying to do. I would start off by saying that we must be very humble in this setting. Frankly, Canada is, I would say, behind the curve on this issue, but we hope to be catching up. Canada is already an increasingly cashless society. We heard the Prime Minister yesterday discussing the importance of e-commerce. We are doing well in that area. We also have some of the highest penetration rates of internet in the world, which works to our benefit. And we have, in government, been experimenting with digital service delivery. But it's clear that we need to take the next step. In order to do so, the Government of Canada, in partnership with private industry and other stakeholders, has developed a forum for the development of digital identity called the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada. It is based on the principle that there are a number of stakeholders that must be engaged in this discussion if it is to be effective. And the first work of this council was to develop some frameworks around the principles of what a Canadian digital identity ecosystem would look like. Much like Aadhaar, they include things such as the system must be robust, secure, and scalable. It must be resilient. It must be able to function and help in case of disaster recovery. It must be flexible and be able to adapt to the latest advances in security technologies and policy. It must also be able to provide for a foundation of awareness and training, including for access control, audit, and accountability. All of these are very important in order to be able to have a system that will function both in good times and in bad, and in the present and in the future. Again, It must also, the second principle, implement and protect and enhance privacy by design. This, I think, goes back to the trust issue that we spoke about earlier, and therefore the issues related to privacy must be taken into account and built in from the beginning. It must be transparent in governance and operation. Canadians need to know how the system is going to be operated. They need to know that they can put their trust in it, and they need to know how they can influence the implementation of the policy and the systems. It must be inclusive, open, and meet broad stakeholder needs. As I mentioned when I started, the platform, the council, is a multi-stakeholder approach. It includes government, the private sector, as well as civil society. And all of these people must see that their interests are being served in this process. And this also leads to greater efficiencies and more utility in the system. By adopting an inclusive and open system that meets broad stakeholder needs, the system can be leveraged by all comers, including the private sector, in order to be able to deliver on economic gain, as well as by the government in the delivery of systems. Another principle in Canada is that it must provide choice, control, and convenience. The system in Canada is perhaps a little bit different than some of what we've seen here in India, in that it is not a single identity. There is an understanding that there will be different identities used in different contexts. Different identities for government services, different identities for dealing with the private sector potentially. And indeed, there is possible in the system anonymous participation, which would be important, for example, if we were to use the system for an e-voting system for our elections. It must be built on open standards and protocols. This is, again, based on the idea that it must be interoperable and open to all. By taking a standards-based approach, it allows easy access by other entrants into the ecosystem to participate in the system, but it also ensures interoperability with international standards. It must be cost-effective and open to competitive market forces. As I said, this is our framework is intended to serve multiple needs, and therefore must be responsive to market forces if we are to be able to enjoy the economic benefits of such a system. And then I would say it must be capable of being independently audited, assessed, and subject to enforcement. I think that, once again, related to the trust issue, if there are problems that arise or questions that are raised about the implementation of the system, there must be a mechanism to assess the situation, investigate the system, and hold those responsible to account. And then finally, minimizes data transfers between authoritative sources and will not create new identity databases. This is, again, as my colleague, the previous speaker said, this is a critical element of the system. You want to minimize the amount of data that is both transferred and held, and you do not want to create new databases and new ways that people's information is held. So this is an important aspect for us. So in conclusion, what I would say is that it is clearly evident that what we see with respect to the development of digital identities is going to be essential in the accomplishment of the Sustainable Development Goals. And moreover, that in order to be able to do this, we have to be very careful to develop a framework that is based on trust, transparency, and understanding if we are to reap the benefits of such a system. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Now, may I request Lalitesh to take the stage and.
Thank you, Mr. Ajay Bhushan Pandey, and it's a privilege to be on the same stage with you and Chairman R.A. Sharma. I have had the privilege of working with Mr. R.A. Sharma about a year ago on the open API policy, and I know how revolutionary of a thinker he is, and Aadhaar is probably not the first and probably not the last one that he'll be engaged in. And these are the kind of initiatives that we need as a nation and as a developing nation to truly empower the 1.3 billion people, more than 1 billion of which are still outside the gates of development. I used to work at Google, worked there for 12 years until 2014, building various systems. And one of the systems I built there was this thing called Google Map Maker, which allowed the crowd to map their own countries. And with that, most of the maps you see on Google today are built on top of MapMaker by users. So if you open Google Maps in India, which some of you might have, every road and every lake and every building there was mapped by some user. And that's how those maps happen. So if you truly empower people to build their own systems and build their own services, they do. And our job as technologists and policymakers is to actually make that happen. So talking about digital identity, I think, so we embarked on, as a nation, on the digital identity project with the mission of inclusion of 1 billion people, right? And enrollment was the first step. And actually creating the identity system with all the wisdom that Mr. R. Sharma walked us through. And enrolling 1 billion people was not just a technology challenge, it was a design challenge and a policy challenge and then an implementation challenge. And all of that has happened, and we have now reached the Everest base camp but the Everest of actually including 1 billion people still remains. And the Aadhaar authority and the various applications that the government itself is building on top of that, along with the private ecosystem which is building even more applications on top of that, is responsible for delivering that. Now what does it take to deliver, getting to the top of the Mount Everest of having included, truly empowered and included all of India's, billion people who are outside development today. And I'll talk about, 3 fundamental issues. One is, the goal itself. And the goal is, once you're included people, and like the Honorable Prime Minister talked about yesterday, one of the biggest pushes right now is a cashless economy, which reduces friction, increases transparency, and when transparency increases, harassment of citizens automatically goes down, and a lot of benefits ensue once you do that. Now for 1 billion people to be using a cashless economy, you need to be using Aadhaar as the basis, because our cashless economy is built on top of this system that we have built called UPI, the Unified Payment Interface, which allows any citizen with a bank account to transact with any other citizen with a bank account as long as it is seeded with Aadhaar. And now for a citizen to use UPI on a daily basis, 2 or 3 things need to happen. And I'll talk about 2 particular things. One is security and the other is access, right? And Aadhaar, unfairly so, has come in for a lot of flack on the security front. And having lived inside, Google from the early days of 2002 to 2014, I can say this with, with some level of understanding that there is no known system on the planet that is so secure that it will never be hacked, right? And that's the name of the game. And if we truly believe in empowering 1 billion people, we have to embrace that there will be security issues, and we have to actually design systems so that we can handle that. And there is this one notion which even companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon and Apple and Microsoft, which probably ostensibly have the best engineering resources in the world, have realized that even all of their engineers put together are doing their best to keep their system secure, the systems are still not secure. So what you do is you open up the entire ecosystem to come and report issues as they find them. Not only you recognize that, you reward it and you thank them, but that report is kept silent for 30, 60, 90 days, and you silently fix it, and then you tell the world and thank the person who reported it. And the reason to do that is it's like the plates, the various continental plates sliding underneath each other, right? And security is like that. It silently, starts moving. It's a continuous arms race, and it silently starts moving. And you have these earthquakes whenever a security flaw is found. It is better. Any earthquake specialist will tell you it's better to have a series of small earthquakes than wait for the large one. So in many ways, we have to grow up as a intelligentsia and a ecosystem, and embrace the fact that there will be security holes, and we should ask for citizens and the academicians in India, and we have some brilliant academicians, to report the security issues, and then have a constant process to keep fixing that. And if we do that, then the principle of having 1 billion people transact all their money on top of a Aadhaar based system on a daily basis becomes something that makes everybody far more comfortable. And the second thing I would like to talk about is access, and this is far more obvious, less obvious for people who have not gone to rural India or certain parts of urban India. Mr. Ajay Sharma, in his role as the TRI chairman, is actively working on it. But it's incontrovertible that if you're going to have access, and the fundamental tenet of inclusion in this economy is now the digital identity, and we just heard that Aadhaar is a number, it is not an identity. Aadhaar is an identity when you're actually able to establish that identity using the Aadhaar servers. And to do that, I need to have access to the internet. And a lot of people today do not have access to the internet. There are still arguments about how many, but it's in the hundreds of millions of people who don't have access to internet all the time. And that is essential to provide true fair access to India's services and ecosystems that now every department in the government of India, both at the state level and at a urban level and at a central level, is building. And to provide this internet access, there are 2 or 3 efforts that India is undertaking. One of them, of course, is this transition to 4G and 5G, and then making that ubiquitous. And then beyond 4G and 5G, how do you make Wi-Fi ubiquitous? But all of that has to be powered by fiber, because the kind of bandwidth that the average citizen needs, and it is interesting that the more literate you are, for the same purpose you need less bandwidth. So a person who is quasi-literate, which is the average Indian, who can barely read and write their name, they can definitely not read a page of text. They will need high-speed internet more than people like you and me, because we can deal with text. The illiterate person cannot. Right? So, so high-speed internet in the hands of every person, and then empowering them with Aadhaar-based services like UPI, e-signatures, and so on and so forth, will completely revolutionize our economy and bring fairness and inclusion to all. I will stop with a couple of examples where I had the privilege of working with the AP government in implementing a couple of implementations of Aadhaar in the early days, about 2 years back. When the Chief Minister, Mr. Naidu, came to power, he said, I want to use Aadhaar and make every ration shop in Andhra Pradesh empowered with Aadhaar, so that a citizen, so that we know who all have taken rations this month, who all did not, who were left out of the system, and also to reduce leakage. Long story short, a year later we went live, and within the first month alone, we saved 50 crores per month. That's approximately $10 million. And similarly, the same exercise was done for farmers' loan and the waivers that were done because farmers were under deep stress. And the original bill was approximately 120,000 crores. And when we repeatedly did database matching and cleaned up the database using Aadhaar and kept going back and verifying, the number came down to something like 30,000 crores. I don't know what the actual number ended up being, but last I checked, it was around 30,000 crores. So a factor of 4 difference in the actual claim number versus the number that were number of people that were legitimate users. And these examples are essential to our experience of how to build these systems going forward. And the biggest learning from all of that is we did something right. So this country did something right by creating Aadhaar. And And there are going to be security challenges, there are going to be inclusion challenges like getting internet to everybody. But once you reach base camp, you can't stop. You have to keep going. Thank you.
Thank you, Lalitesh. So now I will share my experiences relating to Aadhaar. And then, so what I intend doing is that I will try to do it in maybe 15 minutes. And I will request Mr. Sharma to remind me if I overshoot. And then thereafter, we can have a exchange of views and some question answers. Friends, in fact, Mr. Sharma has already given you a brief overview of Aadhaar. So I would not repeat this, just a few slides, and then can we go to... So the context of Aadhaar is that he has already explained, and I will just, that it is to provide digital identity to 1.3 billion people. In fact, all of you, I saw when I came here, I was given this ID, and it has my photograph. Now, just imagine that if you don't have this, then your access to, many places in this area also will be very, very limited. Now, imagine prior to 2010, in our country, 70% of the people did not have a credible identity which will be recognizable across the country. And if you don't have an ID, what kind of problem will it create? The access to the services, your own existence itself comes into question, and the people try to question that. So therefore, what is very, very necessary is that the digital identity is required. So Aadhaar was to provide a digital identity and also to provide services and benefits at the doorstep, because it is a digital identity, it is an online identity. Unlike many other identity, we are used to many other identity, people have those identities. But the question is that you may be having a paper identity. For example, here, there is a QR code, right? So supposing somebody makes a fake or something, through a QR code and online verification, you can verify this, right? So this is the kind of a verifiable digital identity which could be used to provide services and benefits at the doorstep. And also the transparent and for the efficient governance, and I will explain to you, and more than that, the security. Because the Aadhaar is being used for the purpose of security. Enrollment part I wouldn't go because Mr. Sharma has already explained to you. So this is the snapshot of Aadhaar, that we have given Aadhaar to 1.19 billion people. Now the 99% of the adults in the country today have Aadhaar. And they are using Aadhaar for accessing the various services. Now every day you have people using Aadhaar online to access various services, whether it is getting a food subsidy, or whether it is for opening a bank account, or whether it is for getting a pension, or whether it is applying for a scholarship, or taking a scholarship benefit, or for a transaction. So total number of authentication transactions since beginning is 13.2 billion. There is also another number. Every day today, we are catering to authentication request to the tune of 40 million. 40 million authentication requests we are getting every day. Out of that, approximately 20 million people are the unique people who are somehow, somewhere using Aadhaar. So this is the scale of the problem which is, sorry, a scale of the operation which is already there. Total eKYC transactions which has happened ever since building is 3.64 billion. Total number of bank accounts that have been linked with Aadhaar is 558 million. Total number of bank accounts in the country, what we estimate, is about 1.1 billion. And recently a law has been amended where every bank account has to be, verified with Aadhaar. Similarly, there are certain court proceedings, Supreme Court proceedings, where it has been mandated that every mobile phone in the country has to be verified with Aadhaar. Now, there are 1.3 billion mobile phone connections. Every connection has to be verified by the end of this February. Many times the questions are asked that why do you need to, okay, all right. People ask this question that Aadhaar was meant for identity, Aadhaar was meant for providing subsidies or the government benefits. And when this, when this Aadhaar program was used for providing the government benefits and subsidies, we found that lots of ghosts, duplicates were eliminated, and that has led to savings of over $10 billion during the last 2.5 years. The last year, World Bank came up with a study called Digital Dividend in January 2016. And there, the World Bank estimated that if Aadhaar is used in all government programs of subsidies and benefits, then the government could save to the tune of $11 billion every year. So that's the kind of saving that, and then we have already started getting results that we could save $10 billion during the last 2.5 years. And then the work is still going on. Once we, and this is our estimate also, that once we link all government program with this subsidy, with Aadhaar, then we will save to the tune of $10 billion every year. So that's the kind of a savings that will happen. Another very important thing is happening is that apart from the savings to the government, the people are also getting empowered. I mean, do we not know that, let's say in a village, a person used to go to a fair price shop and then he used to be turned away, that the stock hasn't come for any reasons. Now today, he or she can get his food subsidy or food ration or some other government benefit by putting his fingerprint. So nobody else can impersonate him or take away his rights. So that is the power of Aadhaar. Not only it has provided the identity, but also it has empowered those people. I mean, today, the person who is in charge of giving the subsidy, he cannot divert his subsidy to somebody else. So that is also so the people are feeling empowered, that, without my fingerprint, without my, express consent, without, my benefits cannot be taken away by somebody else. So these are the empowerment that has happened. Today, the people are able to go to the bank and open a bank account without a single piece of paper. They have to just remember Aadhaar number and then put their fingerprints, and then the whole eKYC happens, and then the bank accounts have been opened. The millions of bank accounts have been opened in this manner, and they are being opened in this, and they are still being opened. So that's the kind of empowerment that is happening. And it is not limited only to the bank account. I mean, even for example, somebody needs a mobile phone connection. This is a very basic thing. The earlier, the kind of documentation that used to be required for getting a simple SIM card was very, very daunting. Now today, you just give your Aadhaar number and then a fingerprint, and then a SIM card can be obtained. Similarly, many other services. So what has happened is that it has empowered the government, but much more than that, it has empowered empowered people. And that's the, the key message of Aadhaar. Then another area where the Aadhaar is being used, and let me give you another example that how Aadhaar is helping people. We used to, a lot of people, who are, there used to be famous story in the Hindi Bollywood film plot that, the two brothers used to get separated, and suddenly after 20 years, you know, those two brothers used to unite somewhere in the film, and then that's how the story used to end, right? Now, during the last few months, more than 500 missing children have been identified through Aadhaar. Because, you know, when child is, you know, found in any orphanage or in some child home, and there, you know, we have a program that, you know, we try to make Aadhaar for every child, and then that time it is found that no, this child Aadhaar was already made few years back. And then through that, you know, we are able to trace. So during the last, you know, few months, we have been able to trace 500 missing children. So I'm just saying that, you know, maybe, you know, these Bollywood directors and producers, they will have to perhaps, you know, look for some other plot for their film story. Now that story of after 20 years, you know, the two brothers were united, that thing, you know, would no more hold true, at least in our country. Then, many times the questions are asked that, all right, Aadhaar was meant only for government subsidy and benefits. You know, I am not getting any subsidy. Why I should link my bank account? Why I should verify my SIM card? Why I should link and verify my PAN card with SIM card, right? You know, I am not getting any subsidy. Is this not government overreach? Is this not invasion on privacy? Now, see, I mean, in this digital age, many times, you know, I am worried that, you know, somebody will do some phishing, somebody will use my username and password, and then he may withdraw my money through internet banking, and that used to happen. In just last 1 year, the total banking system in India has lost $3 billion US equivalent of Indian rupees in 1 year because of banking fraud. In banking fraud, money goes from one account to another. Now, if every bank account is verified with Aadhaar, then this kind of fraud wouldn't be possible, because fraudsters will still try to fraud and take money from one account to another, but whichever is the beneficiary account, if that account is verified with Aadhaar, he'll be easily caught. And this is the kind of a security that we are talking about. In fact, the theme of this conference is this global digital cyber security. I mean, isn't this a, you know, example of a security, that how Aadhaar can be used for providing the security in the internet transactions? Similarly, the mobile phones, you know, if any major crime happens, like, you know, terrorist attack or something, there it is found that, you know, when you try to trace the call of the criminals, invariably you will come to a dead end, that those calls or those SIM cards belong to some fictitious people. Now, supposing if every SIM connection or mobile phone connection is verified with Aadhaar, will it be possible for somebody to do it so easily? So therefore, I mean, there is a very, very strong purpose. Similarly, for the income tax, you know, this is something which, you know, happened. So this is the kind of areas where Aadhaar is being used. And one very, very, you know, in the design of Aadhaar, because always it is said that Aadhaar is something which violates the privacy and so and so. But in the design of Aadhaar itself, the privacy and the security is, you know, well incorporated. Because what we collect is very, very minimal data. The name, address, gender, you know, fingerprints, but no transaction data. We don't collect the data about your bank accounts, your SIM card, or your, you know, the property or your income, and nothing. All those data remain in various silos. And because we have minimal data, you know, we have, you know, we are kind of a privacy proof. And also, because we have a minimal data, thank you, sir. So because we have a minimal data, then you know, we are also security proof, because many times, you know, supposing, you know, if Aadhaar was having all your financial data, all your property data, all your, you know, the income data or education data and all kinds of personal data, family details, then, you know, I would have been worried too much about the, you know, the security part. But because, you know, I have so much of minimal data, I mean, yes, we are worried about the security, But then, of course, not that much if we had contained, all kinds of data, because, we have a very, very minimal data, right? And after, in the biometric, what do I have? The face is there everywhere, right? I mean, person's face is not something which is so secret. Similarly, what are the fingerprints? Now, today the fingerprint is the biometric image of your fingerprint. Today, when I'm holding my hands, I know that, very, 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 very strong digital cameras, they can actually take my fingerprints, exactly of the same level, maybe, which is available with Aadhaar. Similarly, when I'm speaking to you, there are digital cameras available, perhaps, in this hall itself, where they can take my, iris picture also. So all those things, if you see, it's not something, which, people say that, the security and then the privacy. Of course, we take security and privacy very, very seriously. But one of the reasons, why we have been able to maintain security and privacy, because we hold very minimal data. And if you hold minimal data, then anybody who wants to attack you, will also try to realize that, after all, what data he has. This data is already available, his face and every other detail is already available outside. So then where is the, why, get into this whole Aadhaar system and try to do that? But nevertheless, we are very, very, very particular about the privacy and the security of the transactions, and then we should be able to do that. So I will end here, and then now I'm sure that all of you must be having lots of questions. So I will request the audience that they can have either give a very, very, ask some question, and also mention the name among the panelists to whom they want an answer. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. My question is to Mr. Pandey. You just said that a camera can be used to scan your biometrics. Now, Aadhaar number is easily accessible. The camera can be used to scan your biometrics. So can it not be used to authenticate and make illegal transactions?
This is a very good question. I would like the audience to please look into the Aadhaar Act and also the Aadhaar regulation. What we have provided is this biometric authentication always happens in an assisted mode. It will not happen that you go to some place and you put your biometrics and then the door opens. No. There is somebody who is there, right? So somebody who is there who will assist you, who will take your biometrics, and then will allow you to pass, right? It is a different thing that, supposing if that person, colludes, right, then yes. But then, I will give another example that, you have been signing on your checks for centuries, right? And then, signature in today's world can always be copied. There are, very fine, printers who can exactly copy your signatures. And then the same signature can be used to withdraw money from your bank account and everywhere. I always give an example that, in the currency, usually the signature of a central bank's governor is there. Like in India, you have a signature of Reserve Bank of India's governor. Now, his signature can be copied because his signature is there in every currency. And then, the Reserve Bank of Governor of India, there will never be any money left in his bank account because the people can copy his signature and take away the money, right? So to say that, your biometrics are available, people will be able to authenticate, the whole question is that there are other systems which will take care of that.
Good morning, sir.
Sir, first. So to whom your question? Sorry. See, there was maybe for the audience, who have come from abroad, let me give a little bit of background, right? There was a news item that 220 websites had put up Aadhaar data, and they had leaked the data of people, right? See, what had happened was that, first of all, I have also clarified in the media and also officially that it was not a leak from Aadhaar. And I must say here that we started our operations since 2010. There has not been a single breach of data from UIDAI, not a single breach of UIDAI. And I'm making this very statement, a responsible statement here. What had happened in those cases is that the people had gone to some department for getting their benefits. For example, somebody wanted a pension. So naturally, when you apply for pension, they collect your Aadhaar number. Now, that department or that agency had published the name of the beneficiaries, that names, father's name, bank account number, date of birth, and also the Aadhaar number. Why were they doing it? Because in India, we had a Right to Information Act, which required those departments to proactively disclose the list of beneficiaries, that after all, public money is being spent on those beneficiaries, so the list of the beneficiaries should also be known to people. So they, as a compliance to the Right to Information Act, they said that, the name and other details along with the Aadhaar number, and then they published, some of them published this in the beginning. But we brought to their notice, saying that, look, now that Aadhaar Act is there, and you should not, publish this Aadhaar number, because Aadhaar number is a sensitive personal information. It is not a secret information, I must tell you. For example, bank account number is a sensitive personal information under the Information Technology Act. But bank account is not a secret number, because when you write checks, you write your bank account number, right? And your check is given to any number of people. But still, you wouldn't like your bank account number to be published, right? So it is a sensitive personal information. So we advise all the departments saying that, you exercise due care, don't publish the Aadhaar number. Now the question is that, if my Aadhaar number is known to, let's say, XYZ, will he be able to misuse it? Will some harm be caused to me? No, because my Aadhaar number can be used with my biometrics, and then biometrics will happen only in the assisted place, where somebody is there to take my biometrics and my Aadhaar number. So therefore, this kind of a reporting happens maybe out of ignorance. So I think the question was from there.
My question, I'm in the back right here, all the way in the back. My question is to the respected leader from Canada. He had mentioned that there are multiple IDs used in Canada. I just want to understand if they had ever considered switching to a single ID, or if they had done the homework of whether using a single ID is good or multiple IDs is good, and what his opinion is on that topic.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And I will remind you that I'm not an expert in this field. I work for the Foreign Ministry, but I will try to respond as best I can. I think in Canada, what we are looking at is different IDs for different purposes. In terms of delivery of government services, then clearly if you are expecting to receive government services, you need to identify yourself and your qualification for those benefits. So we are looking at developing a single approach to establishing an identity for the receiving of government services. But I have to say that we're not there yet. We are behind, as I said, in this aspect. But we are looking at innovative approaches to dealing with this issue. For example, with the filing of income taxes, which is done electronically in Canada, you are able to authenticate yourself to the tax authority using a banking account sign-on as an approach to being able to do that. So we are looking at different ways of managing this issue. I wouldn't say that we have settled upon any one particular approach at this point. What we are trying to do effectively is to take the systems that we have in place and modernize them to bring them into line with new approaches. Thank you.
Yes, please.
So this is with respect to the issue that Lalitesh had also raised about allowing for security researchers to actually audit, authenticate, and test the systems. What we've seen in India over the past year or so is that at least in 2 instances where issues related to Aadhaar data have been raised, one by Samir Kochar when he indicated that replay attacks are possible, and another one with journalists who pointed out issues with enrollments. Your agency has issued first information reports against them. You've gone to the police against people who are trying to make the system better. So what are the steps you're looking to take now to improve trust with independent researchers who want to help improve the system?
So your question is to Lalitesh?
The question is to you, sir, because your agency has issued those police.
Now that, may I know your name, please? Okay, okay, right, yeah. So let me explain to him, because the 2 incidents that he referred to, unless and until you know about the incident, you will not understand, right, what has happened. And there are 2 very important case studies also. He referred to one journalist against whom we have launched police case. That journalist, he carries out a sting operation, and he goes to one Aadhaar center, and he says that, look, I don't have any document. Can you make one Aadhaar for me? And he gives entirely a fake name, and he kinds of, allures him, right? And he, offers some money, and he did offer money on camera. And then, first that person makes a fictitious driver's license on a computer Photoshop. And then using that driver's license, he enrolls him for Aadhaar, right? Only enrolling for Aadhaar. Now that journalist, he thinks that, and he had enrolled under his real name few days back. So he was under the impression that he has enrolled for Aadhaar with his real name, and therefore his Aadhaar would be generated. And now he was trying this, this thing. What happened was that, just see his fate. His, this fictitious Aadhaar enrollment, or the Aadhaar enrollment with a fictitious name, that data also came to us. And his real Aadhaar enrollment with a real name also came to us. Now we do biometric deduplication, and this is a very, very complex operation because we get millions of operations, millions of enrollment packets every day. Somehow in our system, got that fictitious one first. So his Aadhaar, real Aadhaar was generated against his fictitious name, and then his Aadhaar number against his real name, that enrollment was rejected. And so when this whole operation came to our notice, then naturally, so we investigated that what has happened, then we knew all these facts. So what happened was that, so we lodged a police case against him. Because, after all, he has tried to fake his identity. And this is no way to, conduct any journalism or something, right? And I can tell you that yesterday, there was a hearing in Delhi High Court on this matter. And then these matters were brought to the notice. Now the whole problem is that his Aadhaar, the Aadhaar enrollment under his real name, that has been rejected. And he has his fake identity now with his Aadhaar number. And now he's asking us that, please allow me to change my name. So I say that, see what better example I can show to the whole world about the security of Aadhaar system, right? So I said that, no, you will have to remain with that fake name forever. you go to your child's school and then say that, you know, your papa's name has changed, right? So this is the advantage. So the people were asking me that, you know, what happens, you know, if I give you a fake, you know, the fake name, you don't verify the name. I said that, look, you know, with one set of biometrics, you know, you can have only one name, right? You can't have, you know, 5 names with one set of biometrics, and you choose, you know, if you want to remain in the fake name or something. So I think that was the context. Then the second case is mentioned, it was again, you know, I will say is some kind of a misadventure, saying that, you know, this biometrics can be replayed or something. Then again, my answer, I have already given my answer, that, you know, always this happens in the assisted mode, number one. We have a full traceability as to from where this request has come. We have also provided, now that the biometrics will get encrypted right at the time of capture. So all those possibilities wouldn't be there, but in any case, you see, you know, the human mind is very ingenious, and they will try to commit some fraud, try to find some loophole or something. What is most important about this Aadhaar structure is that we have the capability to find out, in case if any fraud happens, exactly pinpoint that where this fraud has happened, and then catch the culprit. So I think, you know, that is also a security. Thank you.
Can I just, you know, add to this issue? You know, you might raise the question that if it is so easy for me to enroll in a fictitious name, why don't you have a robust verification mechanism? And this whole issue of being inclusive was designed at the initial stage itself, because if you have document A, you can produce document B, and with these two A and B, you can produce C. So it's a circular problem. Now, when you have nothing, how do you get the first identity? It's like a bootstrapping problem of the computers. How do you start the operating system? So therefore, we made the system inclusive and easy to get into and the first stage, but then there is a robust security mechanism at the back end. So if you have become Amitabh Bachchan, you will remain Amitabh Bachchan for all your life. So the idea is that if you bereft this enrollment from any benefits, no eligibility, if you just say this is your identity, the 99.99% chances are that for the first time enrollment, you will give your real name and real everything. Second time, you will try to game the system. And second time, you will be eliminated. For this gentleman, you know what happened, not this gentleman, but the guy who example you gave, what happened was that, you know, it was his bad luck that the fictitious thing got first, and he got it, and now he is stuck with that.
Hello. So my question.
But is that research which this person did? What did he prove? He tried to prove that it is easy to enroll into Aadhaar system.
Right, yeah.
But also it got proved that
Sir,
sir,
my question is,
Right,
क्या
please.
हमारा
Right, yeah, please.
Very much for very insightful panel. I'm Elsa Esteves, a researcher from Argentina. My question is for Mr. Sharma. If he can please expand a little bit, how is the relationship with registration of children? If it is any linkage with birth registration? And second, I am interested because India is so huge country, how you manage to register 1 billion people through the whole country. Did you do some kind of agreement with local government, or who is responsible for doing the registration? Thank you.
I think Ajay is the right person to answer, or maybe.
Okay. It's a very good question. We enroll at all age, number one, because we have to enroll everyone in the first instance. So Aadhaar, you know, even a newborn infant, maybe a few hours, he or she can be enrolled in Aadhaar system. And at that, you know, if a child is less than 5 years of age, we don't take all fingerprint and iris. We just take the photo of the child and Aadhaar number and fingerprint of either mother or father or guardian. At the age of 5, we collect the full biometrics of the child, and then again at the age of 15, we take this. But then the Aadhaar remains same for the whole life and even thereafter. Now, you know, considering the magnitude of this exercise that we had to cover 1.3 billion people, naturally, I mean, one organization could not have done this. So we appointed registrars, and registrars were typically the state governments and then public sector banks and some other institutions who were mostly dealing with people. People were going there anyway, because, you know, if they wanted to do some banking transactions, then we say that when you are going for a banking transaction, why don't you go and get Aadhaar enrollment done? If they were going to schools, for example, then we say that, all right, you know, the enrollments can happen in the schools. When the children are born, then we said that enrollment can happen through the hospital authorities, you know, in the hospital itself. Similarly, the nursery and the play school. So we used all kinds of channels and then the agencies, registrars, to enroll people from the various age groups. And that was exactly the reason, because let's say if we were a monolithic organization and we had given a huge contract to one company, we wouldn't have been able to do this. So the whole idea was that, you know, you build an ecosystem, where ecosystem of registrars and enrollment agencies, and then try to involve as many people as possible. But so far as the standards were prescribed by us, you know, in what form this enrollment will happen, what will be the software, what will be the security standards, what will be the qualification of the person who is doing the Aadhaar enrollment, you know, all those things were prescribed by us. So within those parameters and the standards, the enrollment was done through our ecosystem.
And as for the scale, we were doing 1 million, and in fact, at some point in time, 2 million per day. So that, because ultimately 1.3 billion, if you do 1 million per day, it will take 1,300 working days, right? So it's about 5 years. And we did, in about 5 years, we did about 1 billion from the date of issue to the 5 years. That's how we were able to do it.
Sir, my question is the yes, 125 crores Indians biometric is unique? Is really true?
Yes.
Well, means my fingerprint will not match with others.
No. What I can tell you is that we have lots of algorithms, right? And through this, our whole thing is the biometric uniqueness, right? And through that biometric uniqueness, we are able to distinguish, yes?
Can I just answer this question? You know, yes, you are right, it may not be unique, but and it's a pattern matching, not really the, string matching. Now, once you have both the iris and the fingerprints, the probability or the, sort of percentage of accuracy becomes 99.97%, to be more precise, 976%. That's number one. Number two, consider the fact that Aadhaar database is online. So the UIDAI has access to this database, right? It's the UIDAI has it. It can always do all kinds of, algorithms at the back end, and the more algorithm improvement takes place, the more, even if somebody gets duplicate Aadhaar, 2 Aadhaars, the probability is that, it will get cancelled because, we'll figure out, we'll do all kinds of matching and algorithms. So it may be first time, very, very small percentage of people who try doing this enrollment twice, thrice, 4 times. Maybe this gentleman did not prove to be fortunate. Maybe he got the 2 Aadhaars. But then there will be mechanisms where 1-to-1 matching and all that. It's possible to independent multimodal biometrics. There are 12 biometrics, imagine. Everything will match, but all 12 will not match. The probability of all 12 matching is very exceedingly small. So that's how it works.
And I will just add, another probability. Mr. Sharma mentioned about this probability, because you see the biometrics are unique. If you have the biometrics image of an infinite resolution, then of course they will be unique, right? Like, for example, my face would never match with you, right? Right? Even the twin brothers, identical twins also, they will have some differences. The God has not made, the 2 persons exactly same. But with the kind of resolution that we are working, Because naturally, when you design any technology project, you have to have some resolution, and then there's certain things. So as Mr. Sharma mentioned, that it is a 99.997 something, right? Now, what does it mean? That, in a certain odd, rare case there could be a possibility, right? But then, in terms of a layman, if a person tries for, 100,000 times, then he might succeed, right? But 100,000 times, but then, the authorities like us are not going to remain silent that we'll allow everyone to try, multiple times. I mean, we will reach there, right? Plus, I mean, these are the only for this biometric. But then, I mean, there are other parameters, other algorithms which, I wouldn't like to discuss here. I mean, we are able to ensure that, uniqueness, and that is why, in fact, that's one example that, the journalist, who tried to, play with this. Now today he is stuck for last 6 months. He has gone to the various courts and he has went to the Delhi High Court, and I don't know where all he will go. But then, yes, this is what will happen.
So, sir, myself Amit Tiwari from Easy Living branch, and my question is to
the mic. Yeah, sure.
Mr. Pandey. Yeah. Sir, nowadays new technologies are coming in VoIP as well, that you will get the call from your own number. For example, whatever is your number, somebody sitting in the Pakistan or somebody, they will use their VoIP system in such a way that you will get this your own number as a caller in your own mobile. My specific question is, whether are we doing any penetration testing and fraud breaches case study before launching any new product collaborating with the Aadhaar?
No, you see, in case of an Aadhaar, we provide this, we are a platform provider, right? We provide this authentication facility, right? What we say, and we have a very, very detailed guidelines and the security standards of all those who are supposed to use our platform. We prescribe that, for example, the packet has to be encrypted, and then it has to come with the standard. Similarly, the users, they have to keep our data in a certain manner, in a very, very secure manner. So we have all those standards. Right? Yes. Yeah, please.
Yeah, my name is Olaf Götz from the Federal Ministry of Interior in Germany. So just a question for understanding, as you responded to the question for the biometrics, how they are used and maybe fake. Is it possible to use the Aadhaar on your private mobile devices with the fingerprint reader, or you have to go to a station then to use the online services?
At the moment, for authentication, one has to go to the designated stations and run by the designated agencies, right? And that they will have this biometric scanners, and then the biometric scanner also has to meet our standards of encryption. We are providing that the biometric, when it is captured, it has to get encrypted with our keys and our timestamp, so that the same biometric can't be reused, or and so those precautions are there. But definitely not that on somebody's own mobile phone, for example, at this point of time we don't have that facility.
Sorry, then you can't use the Aadhaar together with your UMANG application for online services of the government?
No, it is possible, because we also have another method of authentication, that is the one-time password. So for example, now when I enroll for Aadhaar, that time I provide my mobile phone number to the UIDAI authority, and then if I have to authenticate myself, then I enter my Aadhaar number, then UIDAI sends one-time password to the registered mobile number. And when I enter that registered mobile number, so then I am authenticating my identity, and with that OTP-based identity, OTP-based authentication, one should be able to, prove his identity, and then, he can be allowed to do some kinds of transaction by the user agencies.
See, there is a sense of proportionality in the sense that if you are doing a very, very, serious kind of transaction, you're transferring $1 million or maybe, then the agencies can prescribe as to what is the robustness of the authentication. And there's a in banking, for example, you have a concept of two-factor authentication. So actually these factors are what you know, what you have, and what you are. Biometrics are what you are. What you have is basically your mobile phone or a smart card. And what you know is your username and password. So essentially they prescribe two-factor authentication. So that's the question of, what kind of robustness is required in what kind of transaction, and that is a decision which these agencies will have to take. UIDAI provides various flavors of authentications, as Dr. Pandey said, biometric, OTP, and that's how it is.
Yeah. So please. Yeah, I think, that's...
Question is to Mr. Pandey. I just wanted to know, as Mr. Lalitesh has said, that phishing attempts will be there. So, do you have noticed any phishing attempts on UID data servers? If you could disclose about this.
No, you see, our structure is very different. We provide access only to authorized user agencies. So we have enlisted hundreds of authorized user agencies, and they come to us only through a secure network. And so therefore, in the kind of system that we have, because basically we are giving answer yes and no, right? And answer yes and no that, whether this Aadhaar number and then this biometric is matching or not. Or maybe in some cases, we provide the eKYC information, right? And that request comes from the secure channel, right? So therefore, the whole question of phishing and other thing, that will be something which our user agencies will have to be, they will have to take care. And I'm sure they must be taking care also. So I think this is the last question because, we are also running out of time. We'll have to close down.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Baranya from the Central Ministry of Information, Communication Technology and Postal Services, the Republic of South Sudan. Given the scope that the world by 2030 should provide digital identity for all, my question goes to the man on the left. Through Indians' experience, you said the rural people require high-speed infrastructure for their identity. Now, for countries like us who have large communities which are mobile, especially the pastoral tribes, we have also people who, other countries who have people who are fishermen in the seas. Now, what experiences did you really tackle during your project management in the rural inclusion? Thank you.
You see, there are two parts to it. One is at the time of inclusion, that in the enrollment is done offline. Enrollment does not really, the data does not go real time to the UID server and gets authenticated or gets matched and all that. And matching, etc. happens offline. So one is you do the enrollment, then you transport the data either online or through other methods to UIDAI central server, and then they do the processing. That's one part. So that does not require high bandwidth infrastructure. Second is doing the transactions. Yes, you do require connectivity. And that connectivity, nowadays mobiles are moving on to 3G, 4G, VoLTE, etc. And that fortunately, the kind of transactions which you do, for example, a banking transaction is not a video transaction. It's basically a textual transaction. Authentication is textual. Even the biometric fingerprint data, that's actually an order of few bytes, in fact, few kilobytes, maybe less than 1 kilobyte. So that being the case, the authentication process does not require a huge data pipe to authenticate. And with regard to the, the world, in fact, we have been, we as a country, we are very keen to share our experiences with the world. And we have had, for example, Morocco is one country which is actually doing an ID project in north of Africa, which is which is, their team had come some time back. They met Dr. Pandey and they met us. And we have been, kind of through the World Bank, we have been helping them. So I think we are very ready to help our brothers and sisters in Africa to actually take up these ID projects. And I think the kind of robustness, frugality, the cost effectiveness, etc., that should really suit them. Thank you.
Right. So I think,
Sir,
just adding to, you asked a question about, for example, fishermen. And we have the same issue with people in remote tribal areas. How do you get the internet to them, right? So it's a series of, there is no one silver bullet when it comes to, delivering a network with, digital systems to a single person. And there's a series of efforts that, the ecosystem in India is taking. One is, laying fiber to wherever we can. And then the next hop is using our, wireless towers to Wi-Fi hotspots and 4G and 3G and reaching people. And that alone will not reach everybody. There'll still be, as of last estimate, approximately about 30 or 40 million people who will be left out when we do this. Now, it's a very small fraction, but you cannot leave out anybody. So then there is a whole bunch of research that is happening across, India. For example, there is this researcher who is the Dean of the Electrical Engineering Department, Dr. Ajay, who has been doing research on how do you use TV white space and have a single tower reach out to like 30, 40 kilometers, right? And interesting you mentioned fishermen, because actually he's doing an experiment on the coast trying to see how we can use a very small, cheap tower, which is producing like 2 to 5 watts and reaching out to 50, 60 kilometers into the ocean, delivering 100 megabits per second. So this is all possible if you have the will, and you keep on going at it and don't give up, which is the journey India is on. But like Dr. R. Sharma said, it is very, very important that we stay focused on the mission.
With this, we are coming to end of this session, but prior to that, with chair permission, this program is telecast live on webinar mode. So there is one question from webinar mode, sir. Will you please answer? That will be announced, sir.
Yeah, so I think,
please.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Since we are live right now, we have a question from our remote viewer, from Sharon Zafar. Is biometric security the only best possible solution for cyber security?
the question is to whom? Okay, all right. Okay.
The default choice.
Right. See, I wouldn't say that, the biometric security is the best security. What is more important is the security of the ecosystem, right? Because, just like, anything can be faked, everything can be faked. So what is the most important is what kind of a secure ecosystem that you build. For example, we have seen that somebody did try to enroll twice. But because of our, the whole ecosystem that we have built, he was caught. Similarly, somebody, one question was asked that somebody is supposing if it is so easy to copy your biometrics, then can he use it? Then the whole question is that yes, but then, this has to be in an assisted mode. One has to go for a multi-factor authentication. What you have and what you know. For example, biometric will be something like, what you have. But then for certain kinds of transactions, you should go for a multi-factor and then you start saying what you know. So all those things together to say that, that biometric is the best secure method, I will have a different opinion.
Thank you, sir. In last, on behalf of GCCS and UIDAI, we thank our panelists and the audience. I will request our CEO, sir, to present mementos to the panelists. First, Sri R. Sharma, sir. Mr. Lalitesh and Mr. Walma. I will request DDG UIDAI, Sri Sanjay sir, to present memento to our CEO, sir. Thank you, everybody.